Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz Interview Series with Flautist Rhondar Larson. This Grammy Award-winning musician was born and raised in the mountains of Montana, and at 22 she won the first prize in the National Flute Association's Young Artist Competition, and that opened the door to a Carnegie Hall debut. With the golden flute, she has expanded the sonic capabilities of her instrument with new techniques. Her latest CD is live from China, but it was recorded live all over the place. She talks about this album and so much more, along with splitting time between America and living in Italy. So get to know her and dig this interview, my friends.
Thank you for taking a minute out, Rhonda. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thank you for your interest.
Absolutely. So let me talk to you, first of all, about your Live from China CD. Talk to me about the concert and talk to me about this recording. How do you feel about it?
You know, it's obviously it is live. We recorded it in 26 different cities, using an iPad so our sound engineer could come out and check the levels like during a show with his iPad. And, I think it's it's amazingly clean recording because it's live. In spite of it being live, I think it captures our live energy pretty well. But yeah, it's just part of our shows. It's not even a whole show.
I know there's kind of this camp, especially in the jazz world, where they like to capture the improv of live versus going into the studio. How do you feel about that?
Well, that's the tricky thing here. I'm classically trained. I was born and raised in Montana, and being classically trained, actually in high school, I played sax in the jazz band and did improvising there. So the material that I write definitely comes from improvisation, but it's I'm not improvising in shows. It's fully written stuff, especially because most of them are really fast. I don't. I like technical. I like the craft so much and the technical aspects and the beauty of the music, but when you have a lot of speed, at least for me, I have to work it out beforehand. So they're pretty written, except for a couple solos here and there,
So talk to me about growing up in Montana. How did you get so involved in music and, more specifically jazz?
This is an interesting thing because jazz, the word encompasses so many different kinds of music. So I always say to people, it's jazzy. It's certainly not straight-ahead jazz. It's not even modern jazz. It's sort of the beyond. It's kind of a world music thing that I've come into, and playing ethnic flutes from around the world. And a lot of, again, that material comes from improvisation, but it is pretty written in that sense. So So am I jazz? I don't know. Have you heard any of the music?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I know. Yeah, and it is. There's a lot of lines that are getting blurred. I guess my question more specifically about your upbringing is, I guess, being a jazz show, I was kind of going towards that whole bend of what music when you were young kind of influenced your sound and how you've gotten to this kind of cauldron of different sounds that lead to who you are.
Well, I'll tell you what really happened. From the classical world, I won a really big competition and then got a Carnegie recital debut. And just like the month before I graduated from college, I met Paul Winter of the Paul Winter Consort, soprano sax player. So he asked me to join the consort right out of college. So that was kind of walking from the classical world into a far bigger palette of music. And it changed everything for me. I could never go back to just one so-called genre, and I'm not a real I don't mind the titles or that we have to call it a certain genre, but it's just more than that. That's really a music industry kind of thing that's set it into these certain categories. So I came out of that. I was with the consort for maybe 6 or 7 years. And it was an incredible experience, and we improvised every night at least one piece. We, as a group, we would do it with the lights out with the audience, and see what happened. And it always turned into something pretty awesome. It was so that was a whole different world for me, a different world of training. Obviously, I had loved jazz before that, but even this, I don't think was considered jazz. Although I do remember my first tour with them was to Moscow, Russia. We were advertised as a jazz group, and you could hear a pin drop. They were such an incredible audience. But they were really, afterwards, they were like, this is not jazz. This is not jazz. You know? And this is a guy who came from, you know, they were the first jazz group early on in Paul Winter's career to play in the White House as a jazz sextet under the Kennedys. So that's how long he's been doing it. So, you know, long story short, when I left the consort, I came out with my own CD several months later. And I remember I just couldn't wait till it was done because then I would know what I do. What is it now? It's a much broader music. I love the freedom of it as opposed to the classical world, which is kind of it can be a confining environment. But this was just liberating, and so I've been writing my own music ever since, and that's also a complete surprise to me as a writer. So. I mean, I always come back to the improvisational element is in all of the writing. I couldn't write without it. I'm not sitting down with a piece of paper. I'm improvising the whole time, but I am literally, you know, going from phrase to phrase. And my most recent piece took 4 years doing that. They've never taken that long, but usually, you know, months or days. But there's a piece that took me 4 years. So, you know, I'm a little bit different. I'm not. It's been a bittersweet in that way because people want the industry labels or they want to say, oh, it's this. And, you know, I do Celtic music. I love Celtic music. It suits the flute really well. We've got, you know, stuff from around the world like folk music from Armenia. And like I said, when they're fast and not introspective, they're very jazzy. Is it jazz?
Tell me, what kind of albums were you listening to when you were growing up?
Well, actually, speaking of jazz, I mean, for me, early on when I was in high school, as a flute player, you know, flute, I arrived on the planet knowing I would be a flute player. I thought everybody arrived knowing what they would do, but I realized how unique that was. The flute player that I was just blown away by was Hubert Laws. And, you know, again, it's a different kind of form of jazz, and keeping in mind I'm coming from Montana. So to hear live musicians, we really had to drive probably at least 2 hours, if not 4, to hear concerts like Chuck Mangione, actually Maynard Ferguson, I thought. And I loved the old style of jazz like Stan Kenton, and I used to listen to a lot of big band stuff. And I must say, I don't listen to as much jazz these days. I'm very viscerally oriented, and if it doesn't hit me, you know, within the first minute or so, I'm still looking, you know.
Sure. What is it about the flute that attracted you so much? Why is this the instrument you chose?
Well, you know, I honestly don't know. It's the beauty of the sound of it. I think it's that, and I just always, I had to wait till 5th grade to start playing, but I always knew I would, and my start on piano, it was kind of an appeasement from my parents to hold my horses, you know, wait until school, so I wasn't allowed to start till 5th grade. What I never expected where I am in my career these days is these ethnic flutes, because flute and percussion being the oldest musical instruments in history, there's different flutes all over the world made of, you know, some of bamboo, some of wood, some of ceramic, glass, you name it. And that is also a great surprise to me, along with writing my own music, is playing all these flutes. It gives such a greater variety and different spirit to the whole melody aspect of everything.
So after you played at Carnegie Hall, you're in your early 20s.
It was the small hall, just let me point that out.
Okay. Well, but you start off, you're getting into your career. How do you view each successive album? Do you want to go for, how do you see the evolution of each CD that comes out? Is it kind of an imprint in time in your life, or is it an evolution of your sound? How do you view your albums over your career up to this point?
Well, it's a great question, and my real answer to that is I have really focused so much on the craft of what I do, the love of what I do, and therefore the craft and coming out with music, that my I know it's not the right thing to say as a musician, but my last focus was recordings, always, because it's such a different art for me. My love of music is performing live. I love it. And recording is just quite a different animal. And it's so, I mean, I don't know if you realize this or not, but I have 3 CDs of my own, just 3. So I've been on, 20 or more other recordings, but of my own product. So it's almost been every 10 years that I actually say, and that's the Live from China thing, was like, yeah, we can do this, we can do it on the tour. And I'm proud of it. But yeah, so they become a timestamp because of the distance between each one, and the evolution of my own musical journey is so evident, by the successive 3 albums that I've got,
Well, the other component of your career is obviously traveling and going to other areas, and you talked about how the Russians were so kind of mystified by your sound. How much of a joy is it for you to go to other regions of the world to present your music?
I'd have to say it's like 90% interest is being exposed to different cultures and meeting people that we would never get to meet. It's really what has brought the music to me in a whole different palette, going to other countries. And I've been to a lot of places. I mean, with the concert, we won a Grammy Award. I have a Grammy Award with them from our Live in Spain tour. But whether it's Europe or, China, or I've been to so many places, Belarus, and fascinating places. It's changed my life. You come back a whole different person. And the minute you pick up your instrument, it's like we take the music in. I always think as a musician, you take it in, you take life in very raw, and then it comes back out through music. You give it back. And for me, the whole goal there is it should lift people up. I'm not into cerebral stuff. It doesn't interest me. That if you have to know everything about what's going on, but that it take you on a journey. That's really where I'm at with it. And the amazement to me is playing in these different cultures, and you don't even speak the same language of these places you're playing, and people are moved by the music, either by the introspective aspect of it or with the fast tunes. They're excited, and that's incredible to me. And like they say, music is the universal language. It's just so proven every time we walk on stage.
Speaking of journey, speaking of geography, you live part-time in Italy, correct?
Right. My husband and I have a house over there. We're actually headed there in a week.
What is that like to live in Italy? My ancestors come from there. I've been over there several times, and I love Italy. And
yes,
to live there
your last name, yeah.
Yeah, and I was actually over there during 9/11. I was in the back of a boat in Venice when it happened, and someone was trying to throw their arms in the air and explain what happened, and I'm just kind of like, what are you talking about? So that was a whole other kind of story, but going over there several times, just visiting was amazing. So to live there, what is that like?
It's a magical place. The only way I know how to put it is they really know how to live life gratefully and take it in, 100%. They, meals, as you know, are like 4 hours, and it's just beautiful, and it's real food. Like it actually, wow, who knew tomatoes had flavor?
Yeah, right.
But, and it's an exquisite place that we never get tired of. In fact, I had been to Italy on tour before I met my husband, and when we decided to get married, I was on a tour in Belarus, and we came off that tour and we got married in Italy. We just decided, well, we both love it. Let's just get married there, and we had to organize it. It was quite a feat to get all the paperwork so that it's legal in another country, but it was like I always call it like a medieval dream. It was just exquisite. And I'd have to say, just without you knowing me or anything, there's a part of me that I love medieval. It's like I resonate with every aspect of it, like even the old churches and the clothing and the music and everything. It's just so again, when I went out on my own after the concert, I realized I can play any music I love. Why do I have to, have it fit a title or a genre? anything, and so that's what I've been living by for over 20 years now, 40 years, let's say.
Well, speaking of all of those decades of being active, how do you feel about your career? Are you happy?
Well, it's never been more difficult in the industry as far as my experience goes. The record, all the obvious things about internet and the record companies and stuff. And I felt at the time, when I was just out of college, I was really, really strong about not having a record label tell me what I would do next, And so I was able to do what was coming from inside myself and then take a chance on it. And then after that, that's really when the industry completely changed and the record companies didn't matter that much. And that's been a great freedom in many ways. But I think for me, it's hard to, I'd have to say, which is a real surprise, it's been a surprise to me, maybe in the last 6 years I've really realized this. Flute is a hard sell. And who knew? It never even occurred to me. So when you say flute, and that I lead a band, they're like, I don't know, I guess they're thinking Peter and the Wolf. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's been, on the other side of the business, I have literally gotten to live the artistic life and I have a lot to show for it. And first of all in my soul, but then in the music, and performing. It's so incredible to be able to give it away, to perform. When you walk out there, the work's done, you're done, you just you give a 2,000%, and I love it. I live for it. And as opposed to recordings, now that's done and now you got to spend a whole lot of time on physically getting it out there.
Yeah. It's funny you say give it away the way you did. You kind of created a moment of deja vu for me. I remember when I created this radio show, it was back in 2011. One of my very first interviews was Hubert Laws.
Wow.
Now, I don't know why, and I don't know why he decided to pursue, but it wasn't one of those things where he said yes. He called me. And he really wanted to do the interview. And I remember we were on the phone, and he said, Joe, I went to the car wash the other day, and some guy came up to me, and I could tell he recognized me, and I just sat there in my car, and I thought, I'm at an age and a point in my life where I can hold on to all of this, or I can just give it away. And I think he was telling me that. Like his acquiescence to somebody that was just starting out doing this without anything other than me just saying, I got a radio show, will you do an interview? He was a legend. The way you said that was exactly the way he said it to me, and it was profound. And
that's beautiful.
Yeah, and to this day, I've had a lot of plugs for my radio show. Hubert Laws' plug is the most exquisite plug I've ever gotten in my entire life. So.
Oh, how neat. And he's a good friend too. We all kind of know each other in the flute world. He's a beautiful guy. That's a wonderful story. Yeah,
he is a genuine cat. So let me ask you this. The one thing about learning, one thing I would think about being a musician, and I'm not a practicing one, is that you learn just as much from seeing live performances as you do by doing your own craft and practicing. And my question is this. What live performances have you seen that have really moved you and made a deep impact on you?
Well, early on, I was way early high school, maybe late, ninth grade or something. I was blown away by Maynard Ferguson because I'd never seen anything like that, and I knew his records and stuff, but to watch him Circular Breathe was just, I didn't know anything. Just blown away. And I'd have to say, because of being raised in Montana and in the mountains, no less, so we were kind of remote from the town as well. If we didn't travel to see an event, you didn't see it. So records became absolutely where I learned everything. And we had a great record store in Bozeman, Montana, and it's been radio and records that first of all, I learned what the standard was out there as far as the flute playing, the quality that must be there. And Hubert Laws is a big part of it. Let's see, other life changer ones. Surprising things. I mean, just some of them were classical. Some of them were pop, like a Toto concert I remember once just blew me away. It's mostly because of the rhythm and the sounds. The sounds were, I really love the ethnic aspect of percussion and, not necessarily drum kit, but like the doumbek and the djembe. They completely transform a piece from a drum set. Even if you have a bass drum or whatever. So I've really pursued that, and the music that I listen to in my own life is completely varies. I listen to some rap. That's kind of new for me, but I've been pretty blown away by some of the new folks that are big, and Paul Simon, but then other than that, it's really world music, pretty obscure, not obscure, but to the general public, it's obscure music, but I love the melodies, I love the instruments, and it really moves me. So that's where I kind of head for my own stuff, and especially with the ethnic flutes, it makes it a lot more easy.
Let me ask you this, and everything's going to come down to this question. Everyone has a version of who you are, your family, your friends, and your fans, but you know yourself best. Who do you think you are?
Well, it's funny. I don't know anybody like me, and maybe we could all say that. I don't know, but I really tick from a different clock somehow. I'm pretty driven. I'm staunch nature, solitude and yoga. I have to be grounded, and practicing is part of my grounding. It's where I know myself best. It's where I respect myself the most. And so it feeds me before I ever give it away, it's first. So it's hard to say who I am. I'm part mystic, Are you allowed to say that then?
Yeah, you absolutely. Yeah. And that could be another conversation that we could segue out of that you were talking about. But Rhonda, thank you for opening up about your career and your life and music. I appreciate you taking some time out.
Thank you for your interest. I really appreciate it. I hope I fit in.
Absolutely. No, I think so.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview. We give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Montana, Kansas City, Italy, and spots all over the globe, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Rhonda for her music and her time. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com. And for every single thing Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.